Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. It's been a minute since I've been on, but we're back and we're
Woo.
better. Yes. And today in this podcast, we have a special guest, Stephanie Osborne Wright, which I'm super excited to sit with and interview and ask questions. And I'm just going to go straight into her credentials. She is a very accomplished woman. She has a bachelor's in science in psychology, where she focused in developmental psych and neuropsychology, which I'm a nerd about developmental psychology. So I'm probably going to ask some questions there. She also has a certification in teaching bar, which is very impressive, a certification for personal training. She's certified as an assisted stretch practitioner. She has a registered yoga teaching certificate, and she's just graduated from traditional Chinese medicine school as a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. So, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And with all of the things that you've accomplished, I wanted to kind of open up the floor for you to let us know and let the listeners know, like, how do you identify as? Because I don't feel like it's always the things that we've accomplished that determine who we are. I think it's the name that we give ourselves and how we blend everything together. So, yeah.
Yay. Okay. Well, first, I want to say I'm so excited to be here on the show. If you guys haven't listened to the interview I did of Ashley, that really it opened up my world so much. I think it felt like honestly like an initiation learning from you. So it's so exciting for me to be on your show. So to just baseline describe who my very essence, who I am, I'd like to see myself as a very I don't know if this is a word, but jungly. I'm a jungle girl. I am at my peak form when I am somewhere that is humid and tropical and surrounded by green, and I can just be in shorts and a t-shirt or like minimal clothing possible, barefoot, just walking through. That's me. And I think also I always have tried to retain this essence of being childlike. I've always just kept my inner child really, really close to me growing up, not even knowing what that meant. I've always just wanted to keep her close to me. So I think at my truest form, I'm just someone who's very childlike and silly and big imagination. I'm always just making things up, and that's really when I feel the most me. But I think that looking at all my credentials, it tells a story. And what the story is I grew up in a home of 5 kids. I'm a twin, and I was the peacekeeper. I was the people pleaser. And there was mental illness going on, and I just wanted to understand them and I wanted to help. And so by going to school and learning about psychology, I realized, well, I believed, oh, it's all in the mind. We can heal through the mind. And then I was onto something there when I found developmental psychology. Really, I got into it because I was super interested in pregnancy and I just love babies. And it made me start thinking, oh, maybe it's in the mind, and maybe it starts when we're kids. Maybe it starts there. And I was onto something with that. And then I graduated and realized I worked at a preschool when I was in college, and it was really cool, but I didn't want to be in that world forever. I didn't want to work with honestly developmentally challenged children. It's just a very sad world to be in. It can also, I'm sure, be
Hard.
very gratifying, but like my heart just couldn't take it. And so I was kind of a sitting duck. I didn't really know what to do. And the first person who hired me when I graduated was somebody who owned an exercise studio. So during that time, too, I was going through my kind of body awakening of realizing, oh, I'm so disconnected from my body. I had muscles that were not there. I'm a little bit of a Gumby, lanky, kind of not a really like strong muscle tone person. And I was doing yoga at the time, and I realized, oh my God, I need to connect to my body. And so through that, I was like, no, 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 healing's not the mind, it's all through the body. And so that for about 2 years, that was my big, just diving all in, teaching bar, doing personal training, stretching people. I eventually did my yoga teaching certification. And then something happened. I moved to New Zealand. I got really depressed, and I felt pretty hopeless. I had gone to therapy for years, but I was at a point where it just, sometimes you kind of ebb and flow with therapy where it feels like it's the right thing to do. Then you realize, I don't think someone can talk me out of this. And somebody that I was teaching yoga to offered an energy healing for me. And I didn't believe in that stuff. I grew up Catholic and I kind of spirituality was either, Father, Son, Holy Ghost or nothing. And I wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't resonate with it as I grew older. Um, and then that energy healing just blew my mind and opened up my world. And it started to go into a slow trickle of the world of energy and spirituality. And then so really I found Chinese medicine kind of on happenstance. I don't know if that's a word either, but it was my sister, my twins' ex-boyfriend. He said, I think you'd like Chinese medicine. I think you'd be really great at it. And I was studying to do either not personal training, PT or OT, occupational therapy or physical therapy. I was on the track for that. And I told him, I don't want to stick needles in people. This sounds kind of woo-woo. And he goes, no, Steph, you should look into it. But I didn't. And during that time, it was 2020, and my health went really, really downhill. I was having allergic reactions to everything I ate. And my personal life with my family was also at a really special low. And I, again, was desperate. I feel like all of my big life changes were stemmed from moments where I was just on my knees, just, I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'll do anything. And I found these meditations called dynamic meditations, which are super physical. And if you want, I can get into the details of that, but it's not this peaceful, you're screaming and crying, you're exhausting yourself. And I decided I wanted to do that for 5 weeks. 5 weeks? 5 weeks. And then from that point, I finished those 5 weeks. I went on the internet and just looked up Chinese medicine school randomly because I was kind of not into, I was already ready to be done with my degree in PT or OT. And I was thinking, that's a bad sign. So I looked up Chinese medicine, read the curriculum, and ordered a book called The Web That Has No Weaver. And then the rest is history. I don't think I decided, I said yes before I even had gotten acupuncture before. So that's kind of a summary of the story that's kind of drawn me. I've always been healing minded. I've always wanted to help others. I think the hardest thing was realizing I needed to help myself first. And so and I think that's how it goes with healers. We we realize how we're going to help people by figuring out what worked for us.
Yeah, and a lot of times, especially when you are the peacekeeper, when you are that person that's the mediator in the family, your first thought is to make sure that everybody else is okay before you can save yourself, because everybody else's state, emotional state, energetic state determines whether or not you're safe that day. So like that's automatically going to be your first reaction. Um, which is beautiful that eventually you found the path to realizing that I have to fix myself first before I can help anybody else. And thank you for sharing that. Also, I wanted to do a little shout out. You have your own podcast. So if anybody here wants to listen deeper into any of the things that she just talked about or anything else that we'll discuss in this podcast, she has a bunch of episodes. She has 2 seasons. She's working on her third season as well. The podcast can be found on Spotify and it's called The School of Whispers, which I'll have in my show notes as well in case you're interested. But she goes into a bunch of beautiful things. So just wanted to put that out there for anybody that wants
Thank
to.
you. Thank you for that shout out. I wouldn't have thought to do that. I'm gonna quickly close these blinds because
Yeah,
this.
go for it. Go for it.
Okay.
All right, perfect. So you kind of talked about the evolution of from when you first started with your bachelor's degree and your healing journey to an extent, right? All the way till when you got into traditional Chinese medicine. And I wanted to ask, like, at what point did you change or shift from not wanting to do anything with anything religious or spiritual to realizing that you do want to end up building your own personal spiritual practice?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I think it happened unconsciously. I was in my freshman year of college, and I had two of my closest friends growing up. Their dads died within 3 weeks of each other. And one especially, I saw him suffer for years, but the other father, he was always the dad I wish I had. And so it hit me really, really hard. And I remember going to my therapist and telling her how things that normally brought me joy, or I'd smiled, but I wouldn't feel it on the inside. And she offered me to go on medication. And my twin had gone on medication. I think my big sister, I don't know if I knew if my big sister was on it at the time, but I just didn't want to go that route. So I said, I think I heard about yoga. I'm going to give yoga a shot. And that was, I think, my first big spiritual moments without realizing that was. So, when I look back, that was it. And I think when it became conscious was, I think it was in New Zealand. Yeah. So in New Zealand, I kind of dabbled a little bit. I got a little bit spooked. And I think it became more, it was at the time, it was more of a novelty and something exciting. But I think about, yeah, I think this is where it became really conscious. I read a book about the energy healing that I had received. And in it, they talked about angel meditations and about connecting with your guardian angels. And I had always had dreams about my abuela Georgina on my mom's side, so my grandma. And I always just, she died when I was 2, but I always felt so close to her. I always had dreams of my daughter, me naming her Georgina. And so I wanted to connect with her, and I was really alone. So I was just really needing deep human connection, or non-human connection. And so I went into this dark room and I did the angel meditation. It was the first time I felt, I consciously called in spirit, and I felt her put my hair behind my shoulder and just hold my hand. And I remember just sobbing, crying, and feeling her so strongly. And then I also felt this other presence. And I heard the word Seraphina. And afterwards, I Googled what is Seraphina. And she's the angel of family and relationships. And she kind of aligns with my life path number, which is a 6. I think it's a 6. And it has to do with family relationships. And so I think that was a point where I felt really this huge, like, bursting open of the bubble, and this really strong desire to connect deeper on this level.
That's beautiful. And also that's very brave of you for the first time that you like do a meditation for it to be in a dark space. Like you went from 0 to 100. That's what you just did.
That's usually how I do it.
You go home.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. And Seraphina's a beautiful name too.
Mhm. I always call her in. She's my there's these two sides of my higher self, Seraphina and Vishada, and those are names that I didn't look up. They just kind of came to me. And Seraphina is the angel. She's the angelic side, and then Vishada is kind of the badass, don't fuck with me, almost Kali warrior side.
Oof. I look you want to ask this question, so I'm just gonna go for it. How did just because when I talked with you on the podcast where you interviewed me, we talked a little bit, well, we talked a lot a bit about Catholic ideals and all that. So I wanted to ask you, how did connecting with this angel as a guardian angel kind of help you reconnect with what you used to think about Christianity or Catholicism, where you're at now? Like, how did that help you?
I think the fact that it was a feminine presence, it felt a little bit separate. I always had believed in angels, but it was really that God the Father authority that kind of pushed me away from Catholicism. So I think it was separate from me until I listened to a podcast of somebody talking about angels and all the archangels, and I realized, oh, it's okay if it's a guy angel or a girl angel. And in fact, they don't really have gender. So yeah, but I think I've noticed that with my spirituality, with new things coming to me, it's usually been either, I wouldn't say masked, like I wouldn't say it was them, like my guides trying to be deceptive, but they were trying to come at me from the filter of the feminine, because that's what I'm the most comfortable, the most open to in receiving, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So honestly, I'm still working on accepting the word God and Jesus. There's been a few times in the past year that, well, actually past 2 or 3 years, Jesus came in. I was receiving acupuncture from my mentor, the esoteric protocol, Golden Needle, and I had Jesus come in and I didn't realize it. It was all these representations. It was a fish and it was a baby and then healing of the hands and all the, and what I told my friend who I grew up with, we went to kindergarten together, and he goes, Steph, Jesus was in the house. And I was like, no, no. And then I thought about it, I go, oh, fuck, it was Jesus. And then I was doing a golden needle for someone else. And then Jesus comes in, and I feel so weird saying, oh, what is Jesus telling you right now? Because again, it's just that language that I grew up with that just felt, honestly, it felt phony. And I'm not saying that Jesus and God are phony. They could be so real that I'm, like I couldn't be, and I'm not saying I don't think they're real, but the archetypes don't resonate with me right now. And I'm trying to work on that, because like life is easier when you're just in a state of acceptance versus resistance. So I'm working on it.
Yeah. Plus, we've had so much propaganda. It's the best word with Jesus and God that it's hard to just in one sitting just kind of like destruct all of that and like rebuild their relationship. So,
Mm.
you mentioned the golden needle, which is something that I wanted to ask you about. Because I've heard you talk about the golden needle ceremony that you've given to people, and then you also offer just a golden ceremony overall period. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So to differentiate really quick before I go in between the two. So Golden Needle is an esoteric acupuncture protocol. So these protocols are designed to help you connect on a deeper spiritual level. And then Golden Ceremony is a ceremony that I created by combining this esoteric protocol with Amazonian non-psychedelic plant medicine, shamanic drumming, chanting, breath work, and energy work. Any esoteric protocol for the most part is going to require energy work, but I'm going to jump into just what the golden needle is. So we needle, I think there's 10 points, and 7 of them are represent the 7 chakra systems. And then we've got 2 on the neck, which are, we call them window of heaven points. They connect the head with the body. There's one window of heaven point, stomach 9, that's literally called welcome to being human. And yeah, I think it's pretty. I think it's a great way to represent what these points can do for you. If you're somebody who's just got that disconnect, it can help you remember, oh, I'm here in this body and it's not that bad being there. But these specific points are for communication. And then we have 2 other points that just kind of tie it all in. And you go into my teacher, my mentor, Dr. Adamson, who taught this to me, he was a hypnotherapist before he became an acupuncturist. And he said what it's like with hypnotherapy, you put somebody in an induced state, and it takes about 45 to 50 minutes. With acupuncture, that induction takes 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes I'll guide people. Everyone's different. And that's the beauty of this protocol. It's different every time. I've been blown out of my pants with what could happen here, but I would say typically what happens within this trance state is we can go deep into your inner world, and that could be somatic inquiry, that can be, it could be a lot of things, and then or you can go into the shamanic realms. And I believe that the shamanic realms are our inner world for a lot of reasons, but we could also say the astral plane. So you can go through past life regressions, you can connect with your higher self, you can connect with past loved ones, you can just go. I've had people just go into the realms and just go on a spiritual shamanic journey. And I love lately what it's been a lot of is soul retrievals. And should I define what that is for a moment? So soul retrieval is a shamanic practice where usually it's the shaman will go into a trance state using drums or whatever it is, and they'll go into the shamanic realms and retrieve a piece of your soul that you've either lost or given away. We all have that interaction with other human beings. We either give a piece of ourselves away or we lose it to somebody. And we can also take it from others too. And so that piece of our soul is usually represented by something. I remember a shaman, she did one for me, and an amethyst was one of the representations of a piece of me that was taken. And so she told me about the journey, told me about the amethyst, and explained it. It all made perfect sense. And what was funny is then I went home that weekend and I found an amethyst on my mom's shelf. And she goes, "Oh, you can have it. Take it." I
Oh,
go, "Oh, okay. Thanks, mama." So yeah, there's really, like I said, like I've had people have full on Kundalini activations, start channeling goddesses. It's Golden Needle can go deep.
yeah. I wanted to add, like for the soul retrieval, a symbol that I got was a banana, which that was a part of my soul that was lost. And then now I'm like, I try to eat bananas whenever I can. So
Beautiful. Yeah. So with the golden ceremony, real quick to tap into that,
Mhm.
I realized that it's not easy for everyone to tap in because we have trauma. And I've been in contact, I would say, with these representations. I call them beings. You could just say it's your nervous system. You know, everyone has their own perspective. And I call them the protectors. And they're the ones that came in when we were really young and we had shit happen to us that wasn't okay. And we were either humiliated or abandoned or afraid, something bad, quote unquote, bad happened. And so they're there to make sure that it never happens again. And that's great. But at a certain point, we're no longer a child and we're adults and we can take care of ourselves and we have free will. And sometimes we want to go deeper. And I've noticed that these protectors, they bar us from going deeper because they're not sure what's going on here. It's a new unknown and they want to make sure their little person is protected at all costs. And so what I typically will have people do is I'll coach them and connecting with their protectors and letting them know, "Thank you. I'm so grateful for you." And step down. This isn't your space anymore. And so I've learned that I can start working with their protectors before we even go into Golden Needle. And I can do that by creating a ceremonial space. And so I will use my drum a lot. I have a lot of songs that I'll sing to just create. Somebody once told me that a song is a grid, and you're creating an energetic grid, especially like shamans with in ayahuasca with their icaros. Their icaros creates a protective grid space. And so I realized, okay, music is integral to ceremony. And I just do what I can to make sure somebody feels so safe to feel, to sense and feel, to express, to be a little bit goopy with the hape. So the two non-psychedelic plant medicines that I use are hape, which is ceremonial snuff. And with that comes spit and tears and boogers. And it's beautiful because it puts you in your body. And I've learned you can't leave your body if you're not in your body. And then in between that and the next plant medicine, Sananga, we'll just do more nervous system regulation. I'll be tuning in a lot to kind of figure out what does this person need. And then we do Sananga, which is a pain teacher. And I love Sananga. And a lot of people hate her, and fair enough, because it feels like there's acid in your eyeballs for about 10 to 30 seconds. But she's also a nervous system trainer as well. She teaches you how to surrender within the shock. And I've learned that, well, in my research, so she clears out Panema, which in the Amazon is known as evil eye. So wishing ill upon yourself or others wishing ill upon you, jealousy, all that good stuff or not so good stuff. And then to simplify that even further, to bring it to the West even more, I would say she teaches about grief and anger. She teaches us about really hard emotions. And so if we can surrender ourselves to excruciating pain that's temporary, that we choose, and we can open ourselves up to learning about really tough emotions, then yeah, I've noticed that it's really easy for somebody to surrender into that induced state of the golden needle. So that's why, yeah, that's why I mean, I love ceremony. I try to make my life have ceremonies as much as possible. And so that's mainly why I created this whole ceremony around the golden needle protocol.
I just went into this whole tangent in my brain when you were speaking. Because a lot of the things that you're saying are very beautiful, and I love that you added the the name of protectors, the protectors that we have whenever we encounter hard situations that are there to just help us. Because a lot of people can just go into like, oh, trauma and like a trauma response, a trigger response, but it's a lot deeper than that. And bringing up the name of like it's there to protect us and that we have to honor it just as much as like it can be frustrating, it can be annoying to have it now, but it served a purpose for a reason. And there's a lot of grays in the spiritual world, grays in the things that we encounter and not encounter. For example, the color black, we wear it for protection. There's a bunch of black crystals out there that we utilize for protection. And there are quote unquote dark entities that some people perceive as evil, but what they're doing is protecting as well. A lot of times, dark
Mm.
entities end up protecting something that's very, very sacred. And this is something that I've thought about. This is something that Matias Stefano talks about as well, that he has had to learn how to work with quote unquote dark entities because for the things that he wants to accomplish and do, they're very, very sacred and they're surrounded by these quote unquote dark entities for them to be protected and for them to not fall into the wrong hands. Um, so I'm just loving everything that you're bringing into this space.
I'm loving that too. That really makes my mind go into because I've really been working on just accepting the quote unquote dark entities as they are, especially in plant medicine ceremonies. You know, it's all you can do. And oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. It's like these ancient mystery schools I think of. This ancient knowing is because you have to level up. You can't just walk right. You know, one doesn't simply walk into Mordor. You have to do the go on the fucking journey.
Yeah, let's go into Avalon, guys, and then no, you have to. I also love the whole Sananga thing, and I have done, I have been in a Sananga ceremony once before, and I just remember laughing. Like, yes, it's painful, it's horrible, but then like after the fact, I just laughed because I didn't know what to expect. And then like I could feel like it was like we're all laying down, and then I heard one person go through and they're like, in pain, and they just show it. And like I can't see it, but I can feel it because we're all like in a ceremonial space. And then it just gets closer and closer. And I'm like in my head, how is this gonna feel? Everyone's in pain. What's gonna happen? How long is it gonna take? This other person's still crying about it, and they did it like a minute ago. And then, and then it comes to me, and I like my whole body just tenses up. And then like for me, I think it lasts 5 seconds. And then I'm like, oh. And then after that was just joy.
Some people some people are so good. And that's something I forgot to mention is you are flooded with endorphins after the Sananga because you had extreme pain. Like that's what happens in the body and the mind. With pain comes pleasure. But I can't I can't believe you did that with a whole group of people. I cried like a baby the first time I did it. It was but I was crying not because it hurt so bad, which is shocking. Some people are so good at handling it, but for me, I just was thinking about everything that was sad in my life and just, yeah, I was just crying. It was nice.
Yeah, and then you mentioned that Sananga is a teacher of grief, which I didn't know. So she teaches grief, anger, how to handle pain. And I knew that Sananga helped clear like your third eye, but I didn't know that it would go as deep, which just makes sense now that you mentioned it, like that she would also help with the evil eye and even jealousy and like the protection of evil wishing and people wishing bad on you as well. And I just feel like that's beautiful that it holds space for grief, pain, anger, jealousy. And I feel like all of that is very helpful in healing just the divine feminine wound and the sisterhood wound and things like that. So
Mm.
that's what I was going off of when you were speaking. I was like, oh my God, all these beautiful things are just coming into my brain.
Yeah. Well, and what I have people do is I have them focus on either a person, a memory, person or a memory is my preference, but if they could focus on whatever else they want to do as the pain goes in. And so as I'm having them breathe and I'm right there saying, focus, focus. Why are you here? Why are you here? So I think again, it has to do with your intention to what you do when you do it.
Yes, very, very beautiful. So you talked about the golden ceremonies and the golden needle ceremony, which both of them are beautiful. And you've shared also a lot of very shamanic and Amazonian teachings that you know and that you hold and that you bring into the space. How did you acquire all of that? How did you practice that? How did you get to the point where you're at now, where you're weaving that information into traditional Chinese medicine protocols?
Hmm. So I guess to start, I'm Cuban, and on my mom's side, my great grandfather was from Venezuela. And then she recently did an ancestry test. I didn't do it because I just don't want to sell my DNA. Did you hear about the breach of 23andMe? Just on a side note, there was a data leak breach. People were stealing in personal information, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah. But she found out through 23andMe that we have Amazonian blood. And I was like, I knew it. I knew it. But so I guess how it started, what I mean, is just kind of always who I was. Like I said, I was a jungle girl, and I was called Mowgli growing up. And then my first time I went to Costa Rica, and I was 8 or 9 years old. Maybe I was younger. I remember being so emotional. It was my first time having kind of those happy tears or those I know where I am tears and thinking like, what? It was just way too complex and mature of an emotion for me to grasp. But I remember thinking there's something there. So from that point, I was always trying to go back to the jungle until I was older. And I realized, oh, it's because I feel myself here. I can be me. So that kind of created this propensity towards what is it about the jungle? What is it about the tribes of the jungle and all of that? And I studied cross-cultural psychology during my kind of like my first 2 years of undergrad, and it really got me hooked on learning about native tribes. And then it really didn't hit me until when I was in New Zealand, and one of my clients, this bodybuilder who owned the gym that I worked at, he was older. He used to be a farmer. He was like in his 50s, great guy. And he started talking to me about ayahuasca. And I was, yeah, like at the bottom of New Zealand where there's more sheep than people, somebody went to the Amazon and did ayahuasca and then felt like he had to tell me about it. And it just, I was afraid. I didn't like the idea of DMT. I had done psychedelics before, but I was like, nah, DMT, that goes too far. But the more he talked about it, the more I wanted to know. And then flash forward 2020, or 2021, it was January. I moved to Orlando, and my friend had just come back from her first ayahuasca ceremonies. And she is a lovely, gifted, beautiful, open hearted woman. But when I first met her, she wasn't like that. She was a little bit more closed off and a little bit off. There was just something a little off. And when she came back from doing her ayahuasca, she was full blown open hearted. So almost manic in her giggliness and her happiness, just compared to who she used to be. And I remember saying to her, I'll have what you're having. I don't know what it is you had, but I'm gonna have it. And during that time, I'd also had my psychic awakening which also came with childhood trauma, a realization of things that happened in my childhood that weren't okay, that were really bad. And again, like I hate lately, I'm trying not to use that word, but for lack of a better term, it was not good. And so I learned, she just started sending me podcasts, and I'm thinking, oh, it heals you from trauma. Oh, you can, whatever, like see all these different realms. Oh my God, sign me up, sign me up. And I just became obsessed for about a year. And I was trying to go to all these places. It didn't work out. It really didn't work out until my husband, he was on board. And then it felt like universe said, okay, now you can go do ayahuasca. So it was about a year of just learning and obsessing over all Amazonian shamans and plant medicines and herbs and DMT that I finally went and did ayahuasca. And it felt like there was a lot of parts to it that were really difficult and scary. And I go deeper into that in my podcast, but long story short, it felt like another homecoming. I felt very natural in the space. And I remember at one point in my second ceremony, I was kind of helping my shaman, not knowing that I was. I was just having little shakes and chirps and things come out of me. And then someone would start throwing up. And after a while, I kind of realized what was happening. And I wouldn't say I was having fun with it, but I was having this really satisfying moment of, oh my God, this is possible. I'm helping. I feel like more myself than I've ever felt in my life. And actually, I'm going to pause there, rewind it even further away from this life, because I always had visions growing up that I was walking through the jungle, walk, 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 walk. Before I went to the jungle, I thought it was because I loved watching the Jungle Book or whatever, but no, it was always just walk, walk, walk through the jungle when I was daydreaming, when I was sleeping. And it wasn't until 2021, within that psychic awakening, I was meditating and I was hitting this point on my hand that is a heart point. So the heart meridian in Chinese medicine has to do with our Shen, our spirit. And I was hitting that point like crazy, doing intensive breath work that I kind of blasted off and had a past life regression of being a shaman in the jungle. I don't know where. It was kind of, it felt like Inca Mayan times, but pre that, because we weren't a big organized society. But I remember just a little bit of the rituals and the way that people looked reminded me of that time. And also I forget what their language is, but one of their words came to me. It's like, I forget what the word is, but it means flower. And then when I Googled that word, I was like, oh, okay, this makes more sense. So yeah, it started even before then, with this obsession with the shamanism, or not obsession, but this connection with it. And yeah, and from there, it's just all, I just took it and ran with it. And it's just, it's helped me become more me than I ever thought I could be.
More remembrance, and just it's just such a testament too, that if anybody here is listening to, well, anybody that is listening that is curious about different things that might be a little bit out there, it doesn't really make sense maybe. It's because you might not have all of the information at your disposal. And it's just beautiful that you're like, oh, I loved the Jungle Book when I was younger. I loved the jungle period. And it didn't click until you realize that you have Amazonian blood within you. Like, we're curious about things for a reason. They call to us for a reason because they resonate with who we are at some level.
Yeah,
So,
in developmental psychology, when children are in that 8 to 12 phase, they tell parents that if your kid has a little interest in something, take it and run with it, because that's going to help them develop into like a well-developed human being. And so I've always kind of had that in the back of my head. If I'm a little bit interested in it, I need to take it and run with it so I can develop myself further.
that's a beautiful like little exercise right there too, like sitting down with yourself and thinking, what did I like or what was I curious about in my life between the ages of 8 to 12? Like that's a really good exercise
Mm.
to reflect back on. Um, so I wanted to also bring up the fact that before we started the podcast, I had mentioned that I pulled some cards. And the card that is generally for the vibe of this episode was the strength card, but the card that I pulled comes from this deck where the strength card also has an emphasis in authenticity. In authenticity and passion, purpose, and the strength that comes from being vulnerable and being authentic. So I'm loving that the conversation ended, or like it's like heading in this no, with the curiosity that we authentically have and following that curiosity to find our strength, our passion. But we also talked about how we're both in a moment of deep discernment. So I guess I wanted to open up the floor to that as well, talking about what does discernment look like now? What has discernment looked like before? What is discernment in general?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, as the people pleaser, I was always asking everyone else, what should I do? And I also wanted, I remember I always had this in the back of my head of, oh, life sucks enough, so you might as well make somebody's day as much as you can, which is a great sentiment. But I think my people pleaser took it and turned it into, you got to make sure that everyone who crosses your path is like, wow, what a lovely woman, what a wonderful girl. And it really also stemmed from a self-loathing that I had. And I just wanted everyone to like me, and I wanted to be everyone's friend and to be the most likable person in the room. And it resulted in self-betrayal and not knowing what I wanted. And so I lived a lot of, that's how it looked like before. If I wanted something, I'd ask everyone else. And I was the last person, I was the last point of reference. And so I think my awakening, especially with doing that dynamic meditation, I cleared out a lot of junk so that I could become clear. I cleared so that I could be clear. And finally, that was the first time I made, one of the first times, because there are times in my life where I just had that spark and it didn't matter what anyone said, I was going to do it. But that, I feel like in this new phase, this new identity, that was one of the first times coming out of it where everyone told me, this doesn't really make sense that you want to do Chinese medicine. And I'd say, I know, but I'm going to do it anyway. Whereas in the past, I felt like I had to explain myself. Oh my God, over explaining myself. It's such a thing that I still do sometimes. And so now what I'm being called to do is, well, one, what's been great is since that psychic awakening, I now have a tool. I have my tools to ask myself first and to be able to discern what's for me, what's my ego, what's my past, and what's my future, and just discerning all the voices. I have one kid I went to school with in my master's program. He jokingly called it being schizophrenic, and sure, like we all have a bunch of voices and a bunch of little dialogues in our head. If you want to pathologize it, go for it, but that's not going to help you in the long run, and it's just going to make you feel like you're crazy, so you might as well just accept it. We got different personalities, and you could think of it as internal family systems. But anyways, so that's been a huge thing, is having myself be the point of reference and knowing that I am the authority on it. First, it started with my health. I am the authority on my health. And then I am also the authority on my life. And I have spent so much time asking mentors and pretending like I know nothing and playing that stupid little fucking game where I'm the student and they're the teacher, and I let them over explain things to me and concepts that I already know, or tell me what I'm going through, where I already know what I'm going through, but I would listen and go, oh, and try to be humble. And it was all a charade. It was all me just trying to find acceptance. And so that's one part of it, is I'm no longer asking as much my mentors on what's going on with me, because I know what's going on and I know what I need to do in a lot of ways. And sometimes I'll here and there I'll ask, but for the most part I don't anymore. And it's a reflex that I'm having to cut off in a lot of ways. And then two, with the relationships, I'm having to discern who's for me and who's not, which is really hard. It's really hard because I have so much love for humans in general. And I and I've tapped into a lot of people's when if I do, I try to turn it off, that energetic connection with people. I try not to have it all the time because I don't think it's healthy. I think I want to protect my energy at all costs. I don't want to pull others in. And but when I do connect someone, if I'm serving them hape or doing energy work for them, I do connect to that deeper level of them. And it's hard not to love somebody. But just because you have love for them doesn't mean that they belong in your life. And just because you don't necessarily need or should have them in your life, it doesn't mean they're bad either. And that's another thing I'm having to discern is if it's not for me, it doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean they're bad. It's okay. Like it's all good. I just right now, especially my world is small and it's become I used to have so many friends and so many but it all felt surfacey. And so now it's just I have it's the outer world, the inner circle. And I think I tried to tell myself too that I was being selfish and exclusive and I don't want to be that kind of person. But it's no, it's just I'm just protecting my energy and I'm just listening because it does take work to have relationships with people. And I want to show up in the most giving, loving way possible. That's how I love to be with my friends. I love to be their person, but I can't do that for everyone. Yeah. So I think that's what I'm moving through in a lot of ways right now.
Yeah, I remember listening to a podcast with, I believe it was Sahara Rose,
Mm,
and she had someone come in that was an expert, I guess you could say, because this was her focus, this was her niche, and it was about female friendships and female relationships, and how she talked about as an adult, you really only have space for five people in your innermost circle that you trust, that you can call and like really be like life or death, like, with. And if you have a partner, like a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, that or wife, whatever you have, they pretty much take two of those spots because you're literally living with them. You're with them 24/7, not really, but kind of. And
yeah.
take up two spots. So then if you have a partner, you really have space for maybe three. I guess you can push it to four other people that are going to be that really close relationship with you. Outside of that, you can have like 10 acquaintances, which are people that you can connect with, that you can be friends with, that have maybe different interests with you, that you can go and hang out, but it's not someone that you would default to whenever you're going through hard experiences. So really you have like 15 people tops. After that, you can just connect. But it's hard because when you're young and you're in high school, middle school, elementary school, you're best friends with everybody and their mother. And then as you become an adult and you start adding more things into your life, like we only have so much energy in a day, so much energy in a week, so much energy in a month, and all of that goes somewhere. And even though we can have more energy, sometimes more than others, we do still have finite energy because we're still human beings. And we
Mm.
need to sleep and we need to rest and we need to recharge. And yeah, we have to prioritize and discern where we put that energy into.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think by having a story that they're not in your inner circle because there's something wrong with them, which I think a lot of us create growing up, I think it always is going to hit back on us. If someone doesn't want us in our lives, what's wrong with me? And that's also another, I'm having a lot of, I had a little bit of like friendship issues my last couple of months at school. And the whole fucking first, sorry if I'm cursing a lot. I hope you don't mind. Okay, cool. The first couple of weeks of that friendship, these friendships tumbling, I asked, what's wrong with me? Why don't they want to be my person, my friend anymore? And then discernment kind of grabbed me by the throat. It's like, bitch, there's nothing wrong with you. You're wonderful and you're lovely and you have so many people who love you. You're just not in their season anymore. It's time to move on.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to describe it. A
Mm.
lot of us go through that. A lot of us go through that. So I wanted to, I guess, open up the floor to see if there's anything else that you want to share, anything that you might want to go a little bit deeper with. We talked about your golden needle ceremony. We talked about your golden ceremony overall, where you brought Amazonian knowledge that you have within your blood and shamanic practices that you've experienced. We talked about their psychic awakening and how we have protectors that we should connect with that were protecting us from our childhood traumas, about our ancestry, about what we're curious about. It's really who we are, about discernment. So, is there anything else that you would like to add to this podcast?
I think what I touched on not too long ago on us, that I learned that I am the authority on my health. Within my awakening, I came across a couple of people who really tried to hone in on the message that, one, we are all gifted, we are all spiritual, we are all psychic, we are all souls, and we all have this special connection to the truth, source, God, goddess, whatever you want to call it. I think lately for me, the word I've been giving it is truth. And so I just want to remind everyone that Ashley and I, we've put time into developing our intuitive psychic gifts, but it's not a gift that only we found under the Christmas tree. We all have it. And you just have to look for it, and you have to just dedicate time to develop, if that's what you want. Dedicate your time to developing it. And I think that I can't see a world where anyone would regret. Yeah, it's hard, but anything worth living for is hard. I think hard things keep us engaged in life. When you're just only looking for easy things, you become passive about life. And I don't think anyone wants to look back at their life and go, yeah, I was pretty passive. I'm pretty proud of that. No, I think we're all proud of the things that we stayed engaged in and we fought for, not even fought for, but went deeper in. And I think this is a beautiful path. It's not for everyone. That's why we exist, so that we can fill in gaps for others if that's what they're searching for. But I just don't want anyone to put a barrier on, like, even with the Amazonian, like, yeah, I got some of that stuff in my DNA, but doesn't mean it's just only for me. It's all coming to the West. It's all leaving the Amazon. It's all being spread across the internet for a reason, because this is the time. This is the time for us to step into our sovereignty, to empower ourselves to know better, to choose for us first and not ask some external body, whether it's the government or your doctor or your mom or your sister, what are you supposed to do? I think that's going to lead to a life that's where you just feel lost. At least that's how I felt. I felt lost and sick. And it's hard to explain this change that it made for me. But once I started developing all of this stuff, I was no longer lost. I was no longer sick. I was no longer homesick. I was always homesick growing up, and I didn't know why. And even when I was in the jungle, I still felt that homesickness. And I realize now I don't feel that anymore, because I learned, I think about all those times that I was really pushed to that hairline edge, those moments of depression, those moments of desperation. I recently did a dieta, plant medicine dieta in the jungle, and I was alone for 10 days in a hut. And those were all those, I think of all those moments where I was so low and alone, or quote unquote alone, and crying, and my chest is heaving, I can't catch my breath. And those are the moments where I found the most love for myself that I carry everywhere I go. I was telling my mom about those moments. I could cry right now thinking about them, because I found me. I found me in them. So don't put the barriers to entry on yourself for intuition and psychicness and the whispers and all of that stuff. And also with your lineage or whatever, because we all have, I know this probably isn't a popular opinion, but we all have connection to every lineage of culture and race. We do. And there are going to be some that resonate more than others because of this lifetime, or because of another lifetime. You just got to kind of follow that karmic stream of things. But also, don't be afraid of doing the hard thing, because if you choose to have a certain lens that things happen for you rather than happening to you, I promise you're going to find yourself in that lowest point. And that's, like I said, that's the self-love that you're going to get to carry with you all the way through the rest of your life.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. That brings up discernment as well. Because I personally believe, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to put it out there, that almost every single indigenous culture has very similar ceremonies and traditions and substances that can get you to that alter state. It's just whether or not you are more resonating with something that is in South America, maybe something that is in Central America, maybe something that is in Europe, maybe something that's in Asia. It just depends on like what you feel. But the medicine of ayahuasca can be found in other things that's not just ayahuasca. It's just what's resonating with you. And you have to discern what that is. There is a very slight difference in between like resonance and cultural appropriation. And the thing is that sometimes people speaking about cultural appropriation brings in more division and hate than it does like teaching and wisdom and education and respect. And it's also that discernment of like what is true cultural appropriation versus what actually resonates with my soul. What am I respecting? What am I not respecting? Um, so it's also a whole other layer of discernment in the spiritual practices. And the only way that you can find out what truly resonates with you and what doesn't is with experience. It's with going for it. It's with being curious and trying it out. And sadly, like sometimes these things of like cultural appropriation kind of is another layer of preventing us or barring us, I guess you could say, from experiencing these things because we feel subconscious of not wanting to hurt somebody else's feelings, not wanting to hurt somebody else's culture. But like you said, we all come from we all have all of the lineages within us. It's just which one is more resonating with you because it's the most recent lineage that you're connected to, or which past life is it that you're resonating with the most at this time, which is going to end up usually being also the most recent ancestral lineage that you're living right now. Because when you talked about the jungle and like loving the Jungle Book, a movie that I was obsessed with was Aladdin. I loved Aladdin when I was little. And it just turns out that my great grandmother came from a Spartan Spain that was like right next to Morocco.
Uh-huh.
When I went to Spain, I also had that same feeling of like I'm home, like I'm here, and like I got jewelry that was very Moroccan and Arabic looking. And I've been denying that part of myself for so long because I'm just like I'm Puerto Rican, like I can't be like liking all these things. And now I'm like, my great grandmother was there. I don't know what to tell you. So
Hell
yeah.
yeah. I mean, shit. I mean, a lot of my answers are from Spain too. God, we like us Hispanics in the Caribbean. It's hard not to have lineage from Spain.
Yeah, that's the grandmother land.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for saying that about the cultural appropriation. It's what I think all the time, but you know, it's unpopular opinion, and sometimes I'm just not in the mood for any like combative and interactions on social media or the internet or whatever. But it couldn't be more true. What you said felt very, very true and relevant.
Yeah. Well, that being said, I'm down to talk about it if we're open to have an honest conversation and grow a good, nurturing conversation. I'm not here to like argue. So if you're gonna reach out to me about this whole cultural appropriation thing to argue and change my mind, no. But if we're here to educate ourselves and nurture each other's, knowledge, I'm down for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So well, thank you so much for being in this episode with me. Again, if you want to learn more about Stephanie and listen to her own podcast with her amazing episodes, either look at the School of Whispers podcast on Spotify, or you can go to my show notes and search for that. Also, how can people find you or more about you if they want to work with you in any type of ceremony?
So I actually put my website on pause for the moment because I'm kind of going through a rebranding. So I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but I have a feeling it's going to be a couple of months before I put my website back on live. But you can find my Instagram. So I'm on Instagram. I'm Stephanie Osborne Wright. I'm also, you can find me 2 underscores Steve, STEEF, followed by 3 underscores. I also just started a School of Whispers account on Instagram. So you could also reach out to me if you just go on Instagram, School of Whispers, you'll find me there. And yeah, just reach out to me. Just send me a DM. You can send me an email if that feels more official, schoolofwhispers@gmail.com. And yeah, we can just make it happen. With new clients, I always like to do a pre-session call just to make sure I'm your person and that you're prepared mentally, emotionally, all that stuff for Golden Needle or whatever it is that we want to do. So we can just text on DM. I can give you my number and we'll schedule a phone call and we'll have a conversation just to clear up any curiosities or concerns. I just like to do that because it's just a good I don't want to work with somebody who's like, wait, I didn't realize what this is. I don't think I want to do this. I want somebody to really want it and to be ready for it. Um, and then also you can find School of Whispers on Apple Podcast, but I think it's on Google Podcast too, but I never check Google Podcast. As far as I know, I think I'm uploading it there. But yeah, just it's also there as well. But yeah, that's me. I'm probably gonna have a job somewhere in the near future because I'm moving soon, but that's all I got for now.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and until next time.
Thank you, Ashley.